Over the past few years, I have solo hiked hundreds of miles, and I recently decided to check off a bucket list trail that made me question if I should ever solo hike again. But before we get into that, my name is Elliot. Welcome for the first time, or welcome back to my channel. Over the years, I've shared my adventures like hiking and exploring, and this recent trail was one for the books. In early June of 2024, I was in Alaska and decided to take on the Gold Mint Hut Trail. There's a lot of different factors that made this trail unique. Most people spend 1 to 3 days on a trail like this. It can be anywhere from 16 to 20 miles in length, depending on which trail and what you do on the trail. But it also happens to be in some of the most beautiful mountains in Alaska, north of a town called Palmer, in the mountain range called Chugach. Now, I have lived in Alaska since I was about 14 years old, and the Chugach Mountains are some of the most beautiful mountains I've seen in the state. From the glaciers and lakes, snow that is on the peaks year-round, and the picture-perfect sharp edges at the top of each mountain makes these absolutely beautiful. And at the end of the trail is the Gold Mint Hut, or the miner's cabin that's been there for years. From my understanding, these cabins are owned by a miners club and has been upkept for years. Like I said, this was a bucket list. It's something that I've dreamed of. It's something I've seen other YouTubers do. And so I thought, why not me? Well, I live in this state. Why not make the drive? I got there at 6:30 at night, which is a big no-no. Starting the trail in the evening when you have 8 miles is not ideal. Luckily in Alaska, we do have the midnight sun. And so I knew I had the sun on my side. I knew that with my pace, I could make it there in about 4 to 4.5 hours. And let's just say that did not happen.
So the snow I'm walking on right now looks exactly like the aftermath of an avalanche.
I packed and I dressed for what I expected to just be a day hike with a steep incline for the last quarter mile. Pretty basic until that steep incline, which is what the trail does call for. And so to start off, all my expectations were met. It was a river walk with a clear maintained trail markers, and everything that was telling me this is going to be a breeze until you get to that incline. I started cruising from mile 1 through 4, absolutely booking it because I wanted to get to the cabin before it got too late. But it was almost exactly when I got to about mile 5 or 6, I realized this is going to be a nightmare. I started to get into some snow melt and eventually into snow slides and mudslides that had come and just covered the trail completely. Saw a lot of beaver dams where they had dammed up a side of the river that put all the water right onto the trail. And so the trail would be completely covered with water. It was actually pretty cool to hang out with some of the beavers. They didn't really like me that much, but I was just trying to find where the trail was, so shout out to them. I remember stopping around mile 6 or 7 with snow anywhere from 2 to maybe 4 feet deep, and I stopped at the footbridge just to think about what I really was going to do. I knew I didn't want to quit at this point. I wanted to push through, but I just didn't know what my game plan was because of how different the trail was. I decided that I might as well start hiking up to what I could see was not as much snow as there was in the valley, and I would be dead wrong. What I found was more snow crevasses and water that was rushing under the snow, and so any snowfall, I'd fall into water. And this is all anywhere again from 2 to even 6 foot deep from what I could tell. And this is really where I want to emphasize solo hiking. Imagine with me, you're in remote Alaska with mountains all around you. You look like you're in some Lord of the Rings movie or something to that matter, and you're alone. It's quiet. The sun is somewhat setting and rising at the same time, but it's absolutely quiet. "2 a.m. I was alone, thinking by this time I would have already been asleep in a nice warm cabin, but instead, I finally just stopped. I sat down, I was discouraged, I took my pack off, and thought I might as well just quit. Until all of a sudden, I heard this noise call out to me about 100 yards behind me. I had my bear spray ready, looking and scanning to see what just yelled, until I laid eyes on a dude named Steven. Steven had been taking the same trail and had seen my tracks and tried to follow my tracks as best he could to try to tag team with me. He caught up to me at this point when I had given up. We shook hands, explained each other's story, what we had done to get to this spot. Where I was wanting to give up was only about 30 minutes of hiking to the cabin. I was shocked that I was so close and that I wanted to give up. at that point.
It's about 3 a.m. and just made it to the top. Ran into a guy named Steven along the trail coming up behind me, and we have tag teamed the last 1,000-foot climb and been traversing through a lot of snow, up to way more than 6 feet deep. We're just happy we made it.
I couldn't have been more happy to see this awesome red cabin that I never thought that I would get to. It was one last ice and snow field that we had to cross over until we got to the front door of the cabin. And right at this point, you could turn around and see the valley we just climbed up from, the mountain peaks that were getting the sunset, and just beautiful colors and clouds running through them. It was one of the most surreal moments I've ever had on trail. It was 3:30 in the morning when me and Steven were able to chill, to have some dinner, and to get dry, which means that what I thought would be a 4-hour trail took me about 9 to 10 hours. So my biggest takeaway from this adventure was the power of having a teammate or somebody who can help push you through when you're wanting to give up, especially when it comes to some difficult situations where you weren't prepared for. So as much as I love solo hiking, and it's a lot of fun, this was the trail that made me question if I should ever solo hike again. And I think the answer to that is I probably will. Keep exploring. We'll see you in the next one.